evening. Could I ask everyone to take a seat, please? I'm Betty Overstreet, the Executive Director. Thanks for coming out tonight on this important topic, both of them that we have tonight. I do recognize some faces from being here the other night. Unfortunately, the other night's class didn't record, so it won't be online, but it was really a great class. We had Rebecca Heimlich and Hannah Kubin here talking about doing away with the death penalty, and they had some really good points. I wish you could go back and watch it, but just one of those unfortunate things. And then Jim Renacci was here also telling us his vision for Ohio. So I would encourage you, if you have a chance to hear him anywhere, that you show up wherever he might be at to listen to him. Also, all of our classes are posted to the website the next day, with the exception of the one the other night. So if there's any class that you don't get to see, if you can't be here, just go on the website the next day and you can watch it. I want to thank all of you for the donations that you've been giving. It's very, very helpful. If you are new to Empower You and you don't know how to do that and you'd like to, when you sign up for a class, there's a donate button on the registration page. There's also a donate button on our website. And if you'd prefer to send a check in, you can send it to our physical address here, which you'll find that address on the website as well. And of course, if you're here in the studio, we have red buckets that we pass around. If you have $1 or $2 you'd like to put in, it's very much appreciated. I just want to remind you tonight when it's time to take questions from our speakers. If you're here in the studio, raise your hand, wait for one of us to bring a microphone to you. If you're not speaking into a microphone, the people behind you can't hear you and the people online can't hear you at all either. If you're online and you have a question, just go down to the bottom of your page to the Q&A button and put your question in there. I want to talk just a little bit briefly about our upcoming classes. Next Tuesday, March 22nd, we're going to have Rabbi Yitz Frank here. He's going to be talking about school choice and the opportunities that are available here in Ohio and the impediments to expanding. Senator Louis Blessing III will also be here, and he's going to be talking about SB 242, and that is legislation that will require cash to be accepted as a form of payment at retail merchants. I don't know what you hear about cash out there, but every day, I'm a Glenn Beck listener, and I tell you what, if you listen to Glenn Beck, you just wonder if you're going to wake up the next morning and be able to use any cash that you do have. So that's a concern for me, but I don't know how good this bill will do if we don't have cash. Then next Thursday, March 24th, John Kieswetter has written a book called Joe Nuxall, The Old Left-Hander and Me, and that's going to be a really fun class. If you're a Reds fan, come out and hear him. If you're not a Reds fan, come anyway, because we're going to celebrate. If you've got a Reds shirt, wear it. If you've got a Reds hat, wear that. Any paraphernalia you have, bring your pom-poms. You can do a cheer if you want to. And is there anybody here that sings? We're looking for a singer to sing. Oh, good. Dan says he will. We need a singer next Thursday to sing Take Me Out to the Ball Game. So if you can come, we'd love to have you here. Then on March 29th, that's a Tuesday, Kirsten Hill will be here talking. She's on the state school board, and she's going to be talking about social emotional learning and how the schools are injecting behavior therapy on our children rather than instructing them in academics, and that there's a lot more that goes with that. So I would encourage you to be here for that or be online for it. Also that evening, Chris Monzel, who's running for state rep in District 28, will be here. So if you want to meet him, he will be here that night. And next, I'd like to introduce Dan Regano, our managing board member. He's been gallivanting around and he hasn't been here, but he's back, and we're glad to have him back.
Very much. Thank you. So I get to kind of have a surprise announcement tonight, because I just saw somebody walk in who we had a big event, and I wanted to recognize this person, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they signed up for the class, but I guess they decided to sit in their pajamas and watch that night online because it works so well. But I wanted to give a super important award that's been sitting here for the last 4 weeks. It's an Empowered Citizen Award to this person who, I think most of you by now are familiar to what happened to the Forest Hill School Board and the fact that the school board was able to be kind of almost taken over completely. And there's one person that I thought was kind of the gang leader of that whole thing in the way that she communicated and helped that team and got people in place to allow it to happen. I know my friend Michael, who I worked with all last fall with school board candidates, was involved. And that person, her name is Sue Hardenberg. So Sue, I'd like to give you an award, an Empowered Citizen Award. Sorry to trick you tonight, but you surely deserve it. Congratulations. It's great to see everybody tonight. Good to see everybody online. Glad to be back. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you all. The cookies and the Pepsi and the Diet Pepsi are in honor of the team who did a great job while I was gone. Let's thank Betty Overstreet, our executive director. We've got Bill Roll, our treasurer, Leanne Cartier, who's our producer, and one of our board members, Leah Cagle, is with us tonight too, so we're glad to have her. So tonight, our first speaker originally was going to be, after we did this class on the Ohio State Central Committee, where we kind of talked about some corruption issues with the State Central Committee. About two weeks after the class, when I was kind of threatened by the State Central Committee not to have the class, they called me and they said, we'd like to rebut what you talked about that night and say that we're not corrupt and come in and do a presentation. I scheduled them for tonight. And about a week after that, they called me and said, well, our lawyer won't let us come and tell the truth. Can you imagine that? So we weren't able to do that. We've got two probably better speakers tonight, I think, and we're glad to have them. But, you know, in my mind, all of Ohio's government's being run by 4 people right now, just 4. And anything that is tried to be pushed up through our representatives, like Kim is running for a representative, or through our senators, 4 people are deciding what happens in the state. We've got to change the dynamics of the State Central Committee. And I've got a friend here tonight, Barbara Howedel, who has, I've just worked with Barbara on so many things over the last 15 or 20 years that she's just proven to me she stands up for the right thing. So Barbara, would you stand up? Let's give her a round of applause. And I think her website is a fitting name, barbaraforohio.com. And I can't think anybody who is more for Ohio than Barbara Howedel. So Barbara, we are wishing you the best luck. So anybody get to go to the landscaping class we had at over on the western side of town a couple weeks ago? I was so sorry I missed that, but yeah, it was sold out. It's just and I don't know, Betty, for some reason, is the name the name of the I'm drawing a blank. White Oak Garden. If you haven't ever been there, it's the coolest place ever for your landscaping needs. Just a couple other things that I wanted to run by you. Tonight, we've got 2 required reading articles. The first is the bill that our second speaker is going to talk about, childhood trauma. This is kind of a reformatted bill. I had several people call me over the weekend and say they really didn't like some of the wording in the original bill. This is a change bill that Tom Brinkman sent me today that is going to be available for all you to pick up tonight, that talks about what childhood trauma is. So this is for you. The other bill kind of deals with what our first guests are going to talk about. And this was on the Daily Wire. I don't know if any of you saw it. You'll get this passed out to you when you leave tonight. And for those of you online, you can just click the link online. It says, Wisconsin teachers told to hide students' gender identity from parents, which is hard to imagine, really. But it'll be for you on your way out the door. So when I was working on critical race theory, gosh, it seemed like for all of last year, there was just an incredible group up in Northern Ohio called protectohiochildren.net that I got to know. There's a couple, the Stovers, who run it. And they fought alongside of we had 53 coalition members in our group to stop critical race theory. And So a side note on that, there is a new bill. It's a anti-critical race theory bill, but just to show you how some of these Ohio legislators working, they would not even have anybody come on Empower You via a Zoom call to explain their bill to the people. That's kind of the state of Ohio, the Ohio legislature. It is a mess. But there was this one group that we fought hand in hand, fist in fist for kids around Ohio, protectohiochildren.net. And when I heard that Tyson Butler here had been named the Southwest kind of director for protectohio.net, I just knew I wanted to have him in to introduce himself, to act as a resource for your kids, for your grandkids, for really anybody who needs help that's a child. So Tyson is a lifelong activist who's experienced a profound passion for organizing and empowering his community to be active. His calling is educating, coaching young people to achieve their highest potential, whether it's coaching collegiate sports, mentoring students in the classroom, or developing life skills. Tyson has always found that his heart is full for children and their journey towards success. He's honored to be a part of Protecting Ohio Children, where he believes he has the opportunity to combine two of his strongest passions, that's serving his community and protecting our children. So I wanted to introduce you to Tyson Butler.
Aloha. That's what I like to hear. So my name's Tyson Butler. I'm the South Region Director for Protect Ohio Children Coalition, and I'm absolutely honored to be in that position. I was chosen, I was picked out from the activism that we had been doing over in Forest Hill School District. Sue Hardenberg, I can't express it enough how much I appreciate you, and thank you. We have a very special group there. And so as a father of 3 young kids, 2 kids in the district, I understood what was going on in the district, and rather than not hearing about these things, complaining and throwing my hands up, I decided to get active, and I started to plug in. And thankfully, Ohio Freedom Coalition, Michael Connaughton, Linda Caudill, Sue Hardenberg, Lisa Daly, Cheryl Martin, all these people, Katie's in, welcomed me in with open arms and much aloha. And so I'm just a dad, but I'm always been an activist. I come from a collegiate background in regards to coaching. So how can I help? Hands up, how can I help? Show me what to do. So that's where everything pretty much started, where we plugged in, and I learned about the school board. I learned about elections. Dawson Smith, who's going for the state central committee, and he has my vote for sure, approached me, and then I became a precinct executive for Precinct P in Anderson Township. He appointed me to that. So I'm very, 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 very active within what we want to do in enacting the change that all of us here want to see. And it's really, what I've learned is it's really not that hard. And it's really not that strange. We want to be good people, God-fearing people that respect each other, that don't care about race, don't see color, and want to encourage each other in our communities to achieve their highest potential. Exactly what I'm here for. So fast forward through, the Forest Hill School District gets flipped. Very proud of that and our efforts, collective efforts on that. And then I get a call by my good friend Dan Salcido to talk to Diane Stover. And I had seen Diane's emails come through on Ohio Value Voters, Protect Ohio Children. So I understood what her efforts and where she was coming from. But I was very surprised to understand that she wanted me to become a part of Protect Ohio Children. Very much an honor for me. As Dan said, my 2 passions are really encouraging kids and coaching and being a part of the community and endorsing people around me to see the light and to be their best person. Protect Ohio Children gives me that opportunity. The other thing that I would like to say about my efforts with Protect Ohio Children is I'm not just a rah-rah guy. I am a coach and I have a coach voice. Okay, I can yell pretty far. But on the other side, I really love data. I love facts. I like to base arguments on facts. I like to study. I read bills. This guy, I read bills all the way through. And I like to understand what's going on so I can actually have a perspective rather than reading a title or a subscript and thinking that I know everything about that article and what's being said. So let me tell you about Protect Ohio Children. Protect Ohio Children is a statewide coalition of individuals that are here to protect children. Critical race theory obviously was one of those items that we wanted to attack. But now we are also seeing things like comprehensive sex education. There's been, pray about this. I urge everybody out there to pray about this. There's been a really, really big push for the sexualization of our children. Straight up. I don't know how else to really explain that. Along with curriculum and things of that nature to kind of bolster this effort and this agenda. I should know very much how this goes because I am not a lifelong Ohioan. I'm actually from California. Okay. Thank you. I love it here. We moved here because my wife and 3 kids moved here because her dad coached for the Cincinnati Bengals. So like I said, we come from a long line of coaches and teachers, and she loved Ohio when she had to stop here. And so when we were ready to get out of California, we wanted to make sure that we had a place where we could raise our kids and conserve, our conservative values would be upheld. To my surprise, all throughout, we had seen CSE, CRT, SEL, social emotional learning, critical race theory, comprehensive sex education. We had seen that in the schools when my kids were in California. So that was one of the reasons why we decided to get out of there. But lo and behold, now here I am in Ohio and I'm having to fight again against it. But this time I'm not here to run from it. I'm here to stand up to it. And I'm very, very proud to be standing with a bunch of people around me, locked arm in step. So the sexualization of our children is real. Jessica is going to come up here in a little bit and she's going to explain some of the things that we're doing there. So ultimately, my job and what I would like to do and tell everybody here in the Southwest region, essentially Dayton and all the way down to the river, I would like to make sure that you guys talk to me. We have a very big uptick in February of anonymous inquiries into school boards and into comprehensive sex education, SEL. SEL is our biggest fight right now, social emotional learning. So if you would go on to protectohiochildren.net, you can go onto that website. You can find all of our events. You can also, once again, encourage people around you. If they see something, do something about it, report it to us anonymously, and we'll connect with you. Our job is not to be the knight in shining armor to come and save you from what's going on in your community. Instead, we are here to empower you to be who you need to be and stand up as a community. We'll help you organize, we'll network, we'll make sure that you tap into the information and the data that you need in order to make the change that you seek, okay? No one's coming here to save you. Understand that. It's very, very important that we understand that. You will enact the change. And I am very proud to be a part of Protect Ohio Children Coalition to encourage those around us to do so. You can also directly email me at tyson.butler.poc@gmail.com. That's an email that I set aside for these issues to be able to talk to people in my community. I love kids. I love protecting them, and I'm damn good at it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tyson. And Tyson's email address will be on empoweryouamerica.org under tonight's class tomorrow for any of you that feel like you might need to reach out to him. When Tyson and I were talking, he told me this story about our next speaker, Jessica Franz, who we'd met previously, but I hadn't heard everything about just what had happened when she decided she wanted to be the next school board member for the Bethel school system. Jessica is a Christian constitutionist, a fiscal conservative, and a lifelong learner. She's a new member of the Bethel School Board. She was sworn in January 2022 and supports parents and teachers in their respective roles. Jessica strongly believes in keeping racial and sexual politics out of her students' curriculum. Jessica believes in the following quote from Mark Levin: "Education is not supposed to be about administrators and educational bureaucrats, labor unions, tenured educators, improvident construction projects, and indoctrination. It's supposed to be about enrichment and improvement of young people in our society." Jessica Franz.
Testing. Testing. Oh, good. Okay. All right. As Dan said earlier, I was recently sworn into the Bethel Local School District, which is located in Miami County. For those of you who may not know about that area, very conservative red zone. So rural area, growing community. And before I was sworn in January, I was made aware that our superintendent and the former school board president had made a decision, essentially, that they were going to allow a trans-identifying biological male to use the bathroom of the gender that he identified with. And I did discover that they came to this decision after speaking with the school board attorney, who had advised them that in order to avoid litigation, that they should go ahead and make this decision. Now, the school board at the time, keep in mind, I was not yet sworn in, and they had been given no legal opinion. Nothing was in front of them to make an informed decision. They had not spoken with the attorney. We had the superintendent and the former school board attorney, or I'm sorry, the former school board president who had spoken with the attorney. And so I thought, well, surely there's going to be more discussion, right? They wouldn't just make this decision that is so controversial, affecting the entire school system, without maybe a community forum, without sending out maybe a survey, and of course, without not changing the long-standing policy of the district, the long-standing unwritten policy of the district that had been the policy for decades. Unfortunately, that's exactly what they did. When I was sworn in on January 10th of 2022, I had received word earlier that day from a parent who was very upset that an email had been sent out by the superintendent informing all the teachers that this was now the stance of the district. And so later that evening, I was sworn in and an announcement was made. No one contacted me. No one contacted, I think, the other newly sworn in member. Superintendent certainly didn't contact me to let me know what was coming. And the next thing I know, towards the end of my very first school board meeting, a statement was read by our new president that this was now the stance of our district. So shortly after that, being a believer and running everything that I do through, prayer and asking God, what should I do about this? I was absolutely stunned. It's like, God, I knew you put me in this position for a reason, but I thought I may be able to get my feet wet a little bit before going to battle. I knew you put me there to battle, but no, it was, I'm painting myself blue and here we go. So I put out a statement and it said, basically, I don't agree with this decision. I never had any input. I had nothing to do with this. And I will be looking into it and seeking legal guidance as to whether this was done correctly, the way that it was handled. So from there, we had another meeting on February 14th. We had about 200 individuals show up, mostly part of the community. And there was probably close to 30 people that got up and spoke against this policy, because that's really what it was. Now, their justification for not creating a new policy, which is what I said they needed to have at our work session. I said, you can't just change a longstanding policy of a district for decades without some kind of new policy. And they said, yes, we can tuck that under our sex discrimination policy. And they extend sex discrimination to include gender identity. So I said that has nothing to do with privacy, safety, you're not addressing any of that. All of that was just completely disregarded by this district. So anyway, from there, God put me in touch with some incredible people, incredible nonprofit organization, and they started to give me some guidance on how I might address this issue. And they said, well, let's write up a policy then. So we wrote up a common sense policy, basically said biological males use biological males bathrooms, biological females use biological female bathrooms, and then we will accommodate students as we always have. And we had, by the way, just so you know, we had been accommodating the student because legally, that is what we were supposed to be doing. Any student, for any reason that is not comfortable using the bathroom of their biological sex, they have a right to request an accommodation, which had been made for this particular student. They were using a staff bathroom. But at some point that was insufficient. The family had approached the superintendent and told him this is no longer acceptable. And now we want our trans identifying son who identifies as a female to begin using the female bathroom. No Title IX complaint was filed. And it is my understanding that that should have been done. Anytime there's a complaint of sexual discrimination, that should have been filed with our school district. That wasn't done. So we had nothing written that would give me any evidence that the actual sexual discrimination had ever taken place. And additionally, I was told there was a threat of litigation, and later found out that no attorney had ever contacted our school on behalf of the student. So all of this was done on a threat of litigation. This decision was made. So fast forward, I get help writing the new policy and I submit that. Same day, maybe within a couple hours, this resolution comes down. And it was written by our superintendent and the new school board president, although they told me that our school board attorney wrote it, which I found out later. He just looked it over. And it basically said, we're going to run all of our policies through Neola now, which I don't know how many of you are familiar with Neola. I won't get all caught in the weeds with that, but they're a company that helps us with school board policies. Say you tell them I want a policy on this or that. They'll pull different policies for your district and help you write those, get the legalese all in place, okay? And so that they said any new policy, we have to run through Neola. The problem with that is Neola defines sexual discrimination based on a student's gender identity. It expands it to that. So I knew that was a way that they were going to kill my common sense bathroom policy. So again, we don't need a policy because at the same time I'm doing this, I'm arguing we don't need a new policy. You guys need to walk back this decision, because this was nothing that the board had any input into. The community was denied any input into, and you guys, you really screwed up. Well, they refused to acquiesce, to back up the decision, even though the community February 4th was screaming at them, they were very, very upset. And understandably, because they felt like the rug had been pulled out from underneath them. They had been lied to. They had been, it was made in the dark. Policy was made in the dark. And so then I came back with a counter resolution, which was basically the practical common sense policy, but put into resolution language. And to show I was a team player, I contacted our school board attorney to help me with this one. And I asked him to look over the policy. He only suggested I make a few changes, most of which I made. He suggested that I change trans identifying to transgender, which I won't do that because there is no such thing as transgender. You cannot change your biological sex. So you can have a gender identity, but biological sex is not a belief and it's not a feeling. There's biological sex, and then there's gender identity, which is what is based on a feeling or a belief about what you identify with. We'll get into that. So did my counter resolution, ran it through with the school board attorney. He was not happy about it because he had helped the school board president and the superintendent with their resolution. So now I'm asking help with my counter resolution. And so then I asked to put it, and he tells me to remove the law. And I said, well, is that something that you're telling me to do? Is that just a suggestion? It was just a suggestion. And he was telling me that resolutions don't typically contain law. And I said, well, I know that's not true because I've worked on 2A resolutions and they're chock full of references to law and constitution. So he got quiet about that and put his stamp of approval on it. And so I submitted that to the board and I asked him to add it to the agenda for our next meeting. Well, they wouldn't do that. So they came back and told me that the school board attorney had told them not to do that. And I said, what? So I said I had him look it over. So I call him up and he's song and dancing. And well, you just one resolution needs to be on the agenda. And I said, sir, the only resolution that these people can see when they go to our agenda online is the one that you helped the board president enlighten with. Where's mine? And he didn't really have an answer for me. So anyway, next meeting, February 4th again, the parents are there, 200 people are there to say, we want you to walk this decision back. This is insane. And they tried to propose their resolution and the parents were so upset that they tabled it. It has not come back up yet, but neither has the decision been walked back. And like I was saying before, none of this is necessary. All they can make the decision to walk this back, but they have not. So now we recently had another school board meeting this last week, and this was Monday night. And the parents are still asking for them to walk the decision back. We have 3 board members who are adamantly refusing to do that with the support of the superintendent and myself and another school board member who are very supportive of walking this decision back. So I've learned a lot this process about, I've spoke with a lot of attorneys on both sides of the issue. And what I have learned is that in Ohio, we don't have language that expands sexual discrimination to include gender identity. As much as they may wish it that way, some people may wish that that is the case. It is not the case. We do not have that in Ohio. So there is no law in Ohio to base that on. What they're basing this decision on, the attorneys who are representing the school district, is the 6th Circuit Court decision that was made in favor of a trans identifying student. They'll tell you, but because of that, that's law. Well, that's case law. And yes, there is such a thing as legal precedent, right? But this is not well vetted law at all. It has not made its way up to the Supreme Court. And there is another case in the 12th Circuit right now that looks like it's going to go the exact opposite way of the 6th Circuit. There is what they call federal guidance, okay? So from Biden's administration, from the Office of Civil Rights, from the Department of Education. Yes, there's federal guidance, but there is no law. And when I came on to the school board, I took an oath to uphold the Constitution, both the state, the federal Constitution, and I took an oath to uphold the law as passed by Congress, as passed by my legislators. And I'm here to tell you, there is no law. There's only guidance and legal precedent. So do not let them lie to you and tell you that there is law and you have to do this. That's absolutely not true. So, and I'm also learning that there's a thing called privacy right. It's a constitutional right that we all have. And it is humiliating for our students to have someone of the opposite sex come into their bathroom. It's precisely the reason why you have a maintenance man who knocks and yells before he comes into a women's bathroom. He doesn't barge right in to unclog the drain. No, he knocks and calls out to make sure there's no one in there. Because there's two parts of the reproductive system, the male and the female. And biological sex is not based on a feeling or a belief. So a woman's right to privacy doesn't cease to exist, and it doesn't begin because a man feels like he has a sincerely held belief or feeling that he is a woman. Now, students do have the right to dress accordingly, according to their beliefs. If they believe they're a woman, they can dress like that. They can wear their hair long, but they do not have a right to infringe on the privacy of others. And likewise, that this doesn't just apply to males in female bathrooms. This is for females in male bathrooms. A male's right to privacy doesn't cease to exist because someone believes sincerely, has a faith that they really were born in the wrong body and should be the opposite sex. So I hope that some of these things I'm sharing tonight are helping you all if you find yourselves in similar situations in your districts where people are telling you, we have to do it, it's the law. No, it's not. There is guidance, there's not law. And I'm telling you, if it can happen in my conservative district, it can happen anywhere. And I really believe that there's a lot of eyes on our little school district right now to see what's going to happen. And we need all the community and the parent support that we can get, because this is literally a fight for the privacy and the safety of our children. Because if you allow sex to start being defined by someone's subjective belief someone's internal belief instead of biological sex, you are opening the door for bad actors. You are opening the door for bad actors. And I'm not just talking about transgender, I'm talking about transgender, non-gender to get and make potential victims of our children. This is very much an issue of safety and privacy. And again, it doesn't matter if that individual is well-meaning, who wants to come into and use the bathroom of the opposite sex. That has nothing to do with a person's privacy rights. Nothing to do with it. So I think my time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Jessica gets the Warrior Award. Could we give her another round of applause? Thank you so much. It's not easy fighting. We appreciate it. And we also appreciate your chauffeur tonight, Zion, for getting Jessica here. Can we give Zion a round of applause too? So just a couple things. I don't know if any of you heard this class, The Path for Forgiveness. This is quite a book. It's in the library over here if any of you want to read it. It really was a good read. We've got a giveaway tonight. Get your tickets out, your little red tickets that our treasurer, Bill Roll, gave you. They look like this. And I'm going to ask Tyson if he would pick a ticket. And the ticket winner ends in number 949. 949. 949. Anybody have 9? Back in the back. Come on up, sir. This is a book that was recommended to me, Burr. I don't know if you've seen this, called The Deepest Well, Healing the Long-Term Effects of Childhood Trauma. And your name, sir? Jeff, congratulations. Here you go. Thank you. Appreciate it. You bet. Let's give Jeff another round of applause. So we also have another giveaway. I think it's a pretty cool giveaway that it's a book that just came out today. And the winner of this book is Karen S. This is the book about the police officer's account of the Breonna Taylor shooting that just came out today. So Karen S., this book is for you, Karen, online. We're glad to have you here tonight, Karen. This book will get this to you. So when I was working with education all last year, we had a woman on our team that was incredible. And after every meeting, she told me the same thing. And I want to read you what she told me. She told me childhood trauma, especially caused by poverty, leads to shorter lifespans. Poverty increases the trauma, but certainly trauma can and does affect anybody at any socioeconomic level, and anything that we do with education has to involve the poverty issue and the trauma issue. And right about the time I was hearing this every week, I saw Burr Robinson's editorial in the Cincinnati Enquirer. I've known Burr forever. I've watched him do amazing things. And whenever I see his name on anything, I have a certain level of trust, just because I know how high caliber, quality of a gentleman he is. And so I asked Burr last semester to come in and talk about it. For some reason, we just couldn't do it. But he's here tonight to talk to us about childhood trauma, something I know that he is really is important to him. Just a little bit about Burr. Happily married to Terry, father of 3, grandfather of 7, grew up in Minnesota, went to Yale. He's in his 57th year of marriage. And the first 2 were in Germany when he was a U.S. Army officer. Upon his return, he began a 31-year career with Procter & Gamble, focusing on sales and marketing. When not working for Procter & Gamble, his heart was increasingly involved in the community, and he's invested himself so much in the Hamilton County state community, and we're appreciative for that. He's going to also introduce Ron Hummons, who over the past 25 years has been a loving father, childhood trauma activist, award-winning author, film producer, and entrepreneur, having survived severe childhood trauma experiences in the first 22 years of his life. Would you all welcome Burr Robinson?
Hello. All right. Well, thank you for those kind words, Dan. I appreciate that. But I've got to get myself out of trouble first, right off the bat. I was on WKRC this morning, and I mentioned that my daughter, when she was born, had severe trauma because she did not have any emotional or loving response for the first 3 weeks of her life. And that was true, except it's not my granddaughter. It's she's adopted. Okay. So it wasn't my daughter that treated her that way. It was her birth mother. So my wife, so Terry, that was the first thing she mentioned to me when I got home. And I said, oh, I gotta get myself out of trouble here today. Anyway, trauma can affect anybody. It has higher incidence in certain areas. We'll talk about that in a minute. But adults, children, high income, low income, traumatic issues can arise, of course. The issue is how we deal with those. We all struggle with trauma in our lives at certain points. And the issue is, how do we deal with it? Or, and particularly with children in these days, are we providing the resources for these children to be helped dealing with traumatic experiences? So we are focusing on childhood trauma, and we are seeking to deal with this at the state level and at the city level. I'm going to deal with, tell you a little bit in a minute about the state level efforts. Ron Hummons is going to speak to the city level, and LaShonda Sugg is here. She deals with it daily from a counseling perspective, and she'll speak from that perspective. All right, so childhood trauma. A national study was conducted. 1 out of 4 children has 2 major incidences of trauma incidents annually. 1 out of 4, that means 25% of the children in this country deal with trauma. It skews to low income, broken homes, violence in the home, life on the streets. Malnutrition can be a big problem. Not knowing where you're going to sleep tonight can be another big problem. But trauma, as I said, it can't affect anybody, but its incidence is skews to low income. It's not a race issue. It impacts all races, but it is not being dealt with in a shall we say, intentional, serious way, broad way. All right. Think about it. If you've got a school, a grade school with 400 students in it, 125 of those are dealing with trauma. Now, the schools have some support. There might be a counselor, maybe 2, I'm not sure exactly how many, but not many to deal with it at this level. So the effort has been made to have childhood trauma declared a state of emergency in Ohio. That is not unlike when the state of Ohio declared opioids a state of emergency. And to have trauma declared a state of emergency by the governor, and then having done that, to develop a plan, an implementation plan that addresses the need to deal with it. And so in order to get that started, Ron Hummons, and he'll tell you a little bit more about this, conducted a hunger strike on the steps of the Ohio Capitol. And that got the attention of a few legislators there. And it got the attention of some professionals in the Columbus area, in the medical area, the Ohio State University Medical Center, and some counselors up there, a couple of them, that came alongside Ron. And I didn't spend 4 nights up there on the hunger strike, but I was up there a couple of days. And it was from that group that we began to deal with the state legislature. That has been a difficult slog. We had some initial support from a couple of legislators. We had a press conference where several legislators and Ron and others were on the stage, and we were had some press there. But when it got assigned to the Behavioral Health Committee, it bogged down, if you will, and a resolution was developed. The wording of the resolution initially was an issue, but that issue was dealt with. And but the chairman of that committee was not. She didn't really say I don't support it, but her actions indicated that. And so we did not have that pass. What they did pass was a bill to conduct a study. It has a 4-year deadline. Well, one thing about childhood trauma that you don't need to study is it doesn't need more study. It needs action. But this was a way I think that she has had to sidestep the issue. Now, Tom Brinkman has been helpful to us in promoting this bill, and he's not on that behavioral health committee, but he was a co-sponsor. And we are now going to attempt to go to the education committee and see what we can do there. All right. So that's where we are as far as the state is concerned. And I'm going to have Ron come up now. And Ron and I met about 20 years ago. I was at Jobs Plus, and Ron and I got in touch with each other through Jobs Plus Employment Network. And we have developed a good friendship over the years. And so when he got involved in this issue, I was interested in supporting him and, of course, the issue. So Ron, you want LaShonda second?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's fine, that's fine. All right. Let me tell you about LaShonda. Come on up, LaShonda. LaShonda Suggs, LPC, is a trauma specializing therapist and training consultant. Her trauma expertise and ability to make complex concepts easy to understand makes her work accessible. LaShonda founded Labors of Love Counseling and Counseling LLC to help organizations understand trauma and how to move toward healing. That is her focus, healing. As a therapist, she helps relationships and communities move from coping to healing. Through her Labors of Love podcast, LaShonda and her guests invite people into a world of healing, wholeness, and mental wellness. For more information, visit laborsoflove.com, and you'll learn more about LaShonda. So we welcome LaShonda here tonight. Thank you for joining us, LaShonda.
Thank you for having me.
Where is she? There she is.
I have a mic.
Oh, your mic.
Thank you. So oftentimes, people have a hard time understanding what trauma actually is. So people, when they hear about trauma, they often ask, like, you can have medical trauma, traumatic brain injury. Trauma is a big word that brings a lot of different perspectives. So I'd like to talk about what we are talking about when we talk about trauma. So trauma is actually not an event or a series of events. Trauma is actually how the body responds and the corresponding beliefs, worldviews, and behavioral patterns that result from the event and the events. Has anyone in this room ever gotten into a car accident where you were hit from behind? Okay. If you raised your hand, how long did it take you to stop looking up at your rearview mirror every time you went to hit the brake? You probably still do. You don't even notice that you do it because it's not a cognitive thing that happens. But when things happen to us that put our life in danger, that cause fear, distress, and we don't know how we're going to survive, it is our brain's responsibility to collaborate with our body to make sure it doesn't happen again. That's why we as a species have existed this long, okay? So when we understand how the brain and body actually work, that gives us the opportunity when we talk about trauma to realize how the body and brain have to make adaptations to how it's supposed to work. And that's trauma. And so a study was done, the ACEs study that if you know anything about trauma, you may be familiar with, that looked at 10 things in particular. It looked at substance abuse and in the home, it looked at domestic violence, it looked at food insecurity, it looked if there was a parent or caregiver that was incarcerated, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and neglect. So it was looking at all these things, and what it found is that the more of those instances that a person had in their childhood, correlated health outcomes were going to come. So if you had 6 of those things happen in your childhood, you were 1,200 times more likely to smoke cigarettes or to use drugs intravenously or death. But so many people think trauma is an event. Well, if trauma is an event, you just get over it, right? The more time that passes, you get over it. That thing happened so long ago. I mean, seriously, how long? How long do we have to keep talking about this? Well, if it was just a thing that you could forget, okay. But trauma is not about memory. It lives in the body, okay? So when you have a thing that happens, if it's not traumatic, it goes into the memory center of your brain. You go to sleep at night, you ever watch somebody sleep and you can see their eyes? REM sleep, they're moving back and forth. It's like your brain's little computer system. It moves everything that happened today into the memory part of your brain. Then it moves some stuff that happened a few days ago from short-term memory to long-term memory. And so if I said, what'd you do for your 18th birthday? As long as it wasn't traumatic, you can pull open a file cabinet in your brain and go like 18, 18, 18. Oh yeah, I did this. And if at that moment, it was the best day of your life, 20 years later, you're like, yeah, it was all right. Pretty good, you know? If it was the worst day of your life, 20 years later, you're like, yeah, I didn't really like it. Because memories lose their intensity. They lose the emotional connectivity to it. So you can remember it. And if you think about it long enough, you might be able to evoke some of those emotions. But what happens when something is traumatic? Traumatic meaning there was a sense of no control. Right? There was something that your brain and body perceived to put your life in danger. Because we're all different, what might be traumatic to you is not traumatic to another person. So about 15 years ago, when I was leaving my restaurant management job and I got robbed, not traumatic. Just wasn't. They were actually rather polite. Yeah, I think they were struggling with addiction. Needed some money. I didn't have any. They told me to give them the key, all that stuff. But they also said, we're going to run out into that neighborhood. We're going to throw your keys over here. Just don't get it until we're gone. I consider that relatively polite for someone to rob me. Right? But by the time that happened, I had encountered so many traumatic things in my life, it didn't even register. Okay? And so when something is traumatic, life-threatening, distressful to the point that I don't know what I'm going to do, it never makes it to the memory part of the brain. Do you know where it goes? Anybody? Doesn't go anywhere. It lives in your body, which means it's like a live wire sometimes. But a sight, a smell, a sound, a taste, feeling something on your skin, your 5 senses, something can come through your 5 senses and awaken that wire. None of it is conscious. And so what's happening with children who are constantly on a daily basis navigating communities and homes and worlds that are so distressing, and they're navigating it, any sound can activate that live wire. And when it does, we move into survival. We as humans, we can extend this to mammals, so if you got dogs and cats at home, it's true for them too, okay? We only have 5 options. When we encounter stress, threat, danger, trauma, whatever word you want to use, you only got 5 options. You can flock, which is gaining safety through connection. You can flee, gain safety through distance. You can fight, gain safety through control. You can freeze, only temporarily though. And if while you're frozen, an avenue comes for you to flock, flee, or fight, you'll take it. But if it doesn't come, you'll move to fawn. And fawn is what I did when they said, give me your purse. I could have said, who you think you're talking to? My brain and body decided not the time, okay? Now, my brain and body might have given that reaction to a peer at school who said something to me that I didn't like. It might have even came up when I wanted to sass my parents as a teenager. You know what? In that moment, when my survival depended on it, I gave them whatever they needed. Those are the only 5 options we have. The unfortunate thing is our children are flocking, but they're flocking to people who accept them. So sometimes that looks like a gang. Got a problem with that? They're doing the same thing that people who are flocking to the church are doing. They're just going to where they're accepted. Fleeing. They can't sit still. They're always moving. They don't go to school. They're truant. They're fleeing. They're surviving. They're physically fighting. They're combative. All of these things, we criminalize those things. We say the kids are bad. They need punishment. So when we're going to protect our children, right? An entire coalition that is dedicated to protecting our children, we got to understand our children. We actually have to understand how their brain and how their bodies work and how they collaborate. Survival doesn't have a morality. It just does. Law-abiding and the whole night, you are in a part of town where you don't feel comfortable in the middle of the night for some reason, and your locks stop working and they're unlocked, that traffic light can be red all day. You think you're gonna stop? Be honest. No, because survival is going to kick in. When survival kicks in with our kids, they're being punished, they're being criminalized. What a state of emergency on childhood trauma does is it gets the people who need to understand how the brain and body work, the information about how the brain and the body works. Therapists, social workers, educators. You got to be an educator. Real question. Most people don't go straight to administration, so they'll lump into educators. You know what they don't get taught in school? This. But they're required to be in classrooms with dysregulated, traumatized children all day long. And they're overworked, underpaid, and frustrated because punishments aren't working. When punishment doesn't work, we just say the kid is badder. We don't go, do our educators, do our law enforcement, do our medical professionals have the tools they need in order to actually help these children? The answer is no. They can find it, but it's called continuing education. It costs money. Is it accessible? Childhood trauma, a declaration of state of emergency, can provide the opportunity to get that information to the people who need it. If we want to protect our children, we have to understand our children. If we want to understand our children, we got to understand humanity. When we understand that, then the tools, the toys, and the skills we need in order to actually help them effectively is what we'll see. Then we don't have to create stories and narratives around what we think they are or what they're doing. What comes out of a person makes sense when you understand what went into them. People aren't mysteries. Complex, sure, but we're not a mystery. What goes in comes out. But what we do as a society is we take the output and we make our stories up about what comes out, but we're not looking at what went in. That's trauma, what went in. So our effort, our movement, we're simply trying to say awareness and education and getting the right people, the right tools is how we can help people heal from this trauma, because traumatized children grow up to be what? Come on, y'all smart. Traumatized adults, right? Now they're no longer the kids sitting in the classrooms, they're working next to you at your desk, but you're still making up stories about them. And here's the thing about how the brain and body work. We respond to the story our brain makes up, not what's actually happening. It's just what it is, right? So the support for our endeavor would be so that those who are responsible for the education, nurturing, protection of our children actually have what they need to do it effectively, and they haven't been given that thus far. Thanks.
Doggone, up next. Good evening, everyone. So, I had wrote my speech out because I don't do very well with winging it, right? Because of some traumatic brain injury that I had as a child. So I was born with grand mal seizures, and it created a lot of issues when it comes to remembering things. Like I can know it and have it down pat, but when it's time to verbalize it, it goes blank. So as I said, I usually write my speeches down. With that being said, I don't think that I'm going to give the speech that I was going to give tonight. I do want to start with a quote. It's from a very well-known poet. He actually wrote a poem that pretty much explained childhood trauma. So it goes a little bit like this. It's bigger than black and white. It's a problem, the whole way of life. It can't be changed overnight, but we have to start somewhere. So we might as well go on and start here. Basically, his point behind that was, we declare a state of emergency for everything except for what directly affects us. I don't know if you all know this or not, but our government declared a state of emergency on vaping. So think about that. We spent $7 billion on that. $7 billion of your dollars on vaping. So LaShonda, she explained it best, and she's like the star quarterback of the team, right? I mean, she is just amazing. So childhood trauma is as much biological as it is psychological, right? Which will make it nature, which would also make it the worst natural disaster known to man. So if a tornado rips through your community right now, what's the first thing your mayor, your governor is going to do? State of emergency. So that makes sense to everybody here, right? But yet, trying to get that done on a state level, as we're doing, and on a local level, it makes no sense. And I'm blown away by that. Because I use that same example all the time, right? People ask me, well, why did you call it a state of emergency? And I tell them, if the worst storm came through your community right now, they're going to declare a state of emergency. High infrastructure damage, mass fatalities. Yeah. So when you understand childhood trauma as a biological issue, then it's like, okay, where are we missing it at? As you know, LaShonda talked about how our children are criminalized, right? So we focus on the expression of their trauma. Trauma is a language. I lived in Bangkok for a while, in Bangkok, Thailand. And I wonder, you know, as I went to the store, if I didn't understand their language, what if I would have got arrested, thrown in jail because I didn't understand their language, right? Childhood trauma is a language. So what we call misbehaving of children, they don't even understand the language, but they speak it well. They speak it very fluently, right? Because of the trauma that they experience in their young lives. So instead of us taking the time to learn this language, we'll just go ahead and criminalize them, put labels on them, bad, misbehave. And then they grow to be broken adults, even worse, and even worse, misbehave. So we'll build prisons, you know, to incarcerate. But yet we won't deal with the issues that's causing the expression to begin with. So, like I said, I'm not gonna go into the speech that I wrote, but I want to talk about, you know, just the movement itself. When I realized that childhood trauma, that there had never been a movement around it, right? We have movements on everything. How do we not have a movement on childhood trauma when there's the most pervasive issue known to man? whatever race you are. I mean, we see it from our presidents all the way down to just local citizens. Childhood trauma creates our behavior issues, right? Even it from the high class to the low class, right? So what that looks like is that boss that may be very wealthy could have experienced childhood trauma that now has his boss being the most hated boss, you know, the boss that's the hardest to work with. You know, he doesn't want to understand anybody. He's so distant and can't relate to anyone that works for him. So of course, you know, he's going to be labeled as well. It's going to be the boss that we just can't stand. But we don't know his backstory. We all have our backstories. So I decided to do a 48-hour hunger strike, and people ask me like, well, it's cold in Columbus in December. I said, yeah, I know, but I figured a radical issue deserved a radical response. So I became that radical response, right? It got so cold out there, man. I remember I thought I was gonna die a couple of times. Like my fingertips turned blue. So I had a lot of hand warmers and I put them all in my clothes, all over, right? And it didn't really help much. I wrapped myself in blankets. And as I sat there, I had a lawn chair, and as I sat there throughout the night, I thought about my go-to ancestor, which is Mandela. And I got to thinking about, you know, when he sat in that cell and thinking about what was he thinking for 27 years in his cell. You know, his son had died while he was incarcerated. I'm like, this had to be a really, really intense moment for him. So, you know, as I put myself into his mindset, I thought about, what would he say to me? And I could hear his voice saying, stay the course, young man, stay the course. See, it didn't work out the way that I thought that it would. I thought that there would be millions of people coming to support this, and this was going to be, you know, the world's biggest movement, and everybody would get excited around it once we helped people understand what childhood trauma was. And it didn't turn out like that. Matter of fact, the first person that came on board after the hunger strike was LaShonda, because she understood the importance of it. So, you know, me and Burr, we've been friends for almost 2 decades. I'm getting old, goodness. These young guys. So, you know, naturally with his, you know, just care for the community, he came on board, but people were really resistant against it. And I couldn't understand why, right? So, you know, we understood that people had an issue with how we wrote the first edition of the resolution. So yeah, of course, my experience is from my community. I understand the African-American plight of trauma. So naturally, that's where I wanted my focus to go. I didn't want the resources to get just spread it thin, right? I wanted people to understand the struggles that we deal with as African Americans, and the reason for not just the resolution, but the movement to begin with. That was important for me. But also, we understood that our struggles also shared with poor whites, Appalachians, Hispanics. I wanted to make it as inclusive as possible. And it was still a lot of pushback even with that, right? So of course, you know, we went back and we changed it. We revised it to where it would fit the legislators that had a problem with it. But I'm going to be honest with you. The issue that we're dealing with in my community is so much more pervasive than anywhere else. And that's because of just the lack of resources, you know, that we get in our communities, right? And even in poor whites, you know, in Price Hill. So our governor, he declared, well, not declared, but he gave $8 million to mental health, you know, when he first in office. So when you think about it, that $8 million for one is nothing when it comes to dealing with mental health. A big portion of that's going to go to, you know, administration costs. So it's like, are we really trying to deal with the issue? So, which was the reason why I shared it demographically the way that I did because I felt it was important. Because I didn't want the resources just to get spread around. Because guess what? You know, you have certain people from, you know, from communities that are underprivileged and that don't have access to, you know, really good therapy, right? Trauma therapy. And then you have the ones that are, you know, that have a little bit more access to resources. So I wanted to make sure that the ones that are, the communities that are, you know, that are underserved, that they are the ones that really get those resources, because trauma is so pervasive. It's not something that I can just ignore as, you know, just an everyday issue. Yes, we all have our issues and we all deal with our traumas. But for a lot of us, we have the capacity to deal with trauma separately from other communities. So that's where I wanted my attention to go to, and I wanted the resources and the power of this movement to go to. So I'm going to close with that, because like I said, I had an entire speech wrote out, but I'm not going to go into that. So we're going to open up for any Q&A right now.
Yes, we're going to take some questions. I just want to quote from the resolution one fact for you that I think is interesting. So Ohio has 11 million people, I think. 2017, 2018 National Survey of Children's Health found that there were 400,000 Ohio children reported with 2 or more adverse childhood experiences. So we're going to take questions. If you want to address your question to a specific speaker, just let me know which one you want to address it to. Who has a question?
Sure. Hi, I'm Kim. And my question is, do we even understand the extent of the trauma that has occurred in children through these past 2 years with all of the COVID protocols that they have had to experience? And is that what has sort of urged you on to start this movement right now? Or were you already working on this movement even prior to the COVID situation that has happened?
Yeah, I was. I've been working on this for nearly 5 years now. So I've had a lot of people ask me about COVID in connection with childhood trauma. So this is the thing, and this is why, like I said, that it doesn't really get the, it doesn't get addressed the way that it deserves, because childhood trauma, we've dealt with it for centuries. So it's not pre-COVID, or, you know, it's not, I mean, it's pre-COVID, it's not post-COVID. So, you know, for me, like I said, the issue came way before COVID.
Here's another question.
Yeah, my name is Max. My question is, seeing as childhood trauma is so pervasive, and as you mentioned, you thought you were going to get a lot of people joining this movement, and it hasn't been as easy. I just wonder, do you think that might be because people that you're trying to recruit themselves maybe in their own way contributing, because it's so pervasive, right? Maybe they've contributed to the issue as well. Like, for example, you've got parents out there who have, you know, children that misbehave, right? And then if they, you know, join in, are they accepting responsibility for their own part in that? Could that be why you have such trouble recruiting, and how do you communicate with those people?
No, I would say a lot of resistance has actually come from more on a legislative level. People that are in power. Our trauma fuels the economy. You know, I mean, we really want to be real about it. So something that fuels the economy as much as ours do, you know, we don't own any private prisons in Ohio. Ohio owns more private prisons than any other state. So when you start to really understand how trauma works, like I said, through the behavior, and how it gets ignored as far as the expression of it, you know, that's the part that's focused on, but, you know, what's related to that expression gets totally ignored. That's where more of the resistance actually comes from. Like I said, you know, the revision in our resolution, that came from people who represent communities that own a lot of the private prisons. When you understand how the pharmaceutical industry works, the pharmaceutical industry, they're highly connected to a lot of the issues we deal with in trauma, right? A lot of you all might not know the statistics on this, but African-American children are more highly misdiagnosed than any other race. So little Tyrone, you know, or I'll give everybody a name, Malik from Avondale will be diagnosed with the same diagnosis as, you know, little Daniel from Indian Hill. But little Daniel's experience was, you know, was very, you know, they were minor experiences. They created, you know, his trauma, but they'll label it as ADHD. Whereas Malik, brother gunned down, poverty, you know, the only time he may eat may be at school. So he deals with a lot more extensive issues. So
We've got a question right here.
go ahead.
Oh, my name is Teresa. My question is, isn't ADHD another form of like dysregulation? And do they work, you know, isn't that part of it? And then it's kind of a misdiagnosis in a way?
Nope.
No?
So attention deficit disorder is a variation of how certain brains work and process information. And there is a hyperactivity component to it. However, hyperactivity and hypervigilance can look the same when you don't know what you're looking at. So a kid who has difficulty maintaining attention and is moving around can look the same as a child whose nervous system is activated because they are afraid that they are going to be in danger because of the experiences they've had. Because they look the same, they get diagnosed the same, and then they get the same medication. You give someone who is in their sympathetic nervous system, someone who is experiencing trauma, a stimulant, which activates the sympathetic nervous system. What we essentially do is burn out that person's sympathetic nervous system. You give a kid who's struggling to pay attention a stimulant, activates it, it helps them focus, right? So they're being diagnosed the same, they're given the same medications, but it's having two very different impacts on the body. When developmental trauma, and a lot of experts with a lot of data tried to put developmental trauma inside of the DSM, they denied it. Why? Because do you know who funds the DSM? Anybody? Pharmaceuticals. Right? So why would I ever put something in the book that makes me money that says don't medicate it, create safety?
Do we have much more time? Pardon? Let me just close. I think we have to close.
There was a question.
All right. Any more questions? Go ahead.
Several.
We have a question back here.
Yes, I'd like to know if we truly need this emergency, because emergency situation in which a government is empowered to be able to put through policies that it would not normally be permitted to do. So if I have a little boy, his name's Joey. Joey's 8. Joey says to me and his dad, I don't want to be Joey anymore. I want to be Jenny. Your emergency use could possibly take my child out of the home. And I don't know if this is such a good idea, an emergency use to do this. And I have to have another question in regards to Mike DeWine. On June 29th, 2021, he allocated $84 million to pediatric behavior health. That's just a minute in regards to who is actually behind this push, which would be the Substance Abuse Mental Health Service Administration of the United States government. And let's talk about them for a second. Just in New York alone, $77 million alone this year so far, along with $75 million. The only reason I can't give you our amount here in Ohio, because they haven't put it up yet. And there's actually 15 of them that are coming up.
Is there a question
Yes.
that
The
I can answer for you? Is there a question in that?
I just did. Is there a true necessity for a state of emergency that lets you go around the typical stuff, the typical ORCs and the rules and regulations that are on there? Actually, it's 372701, 3727
Got it.
09.
I can
No, no,
answer
no,
the
no, wait a minute.
question.
I'm not finished.
Thanks. I just want to,
Yeah,
we've got
you're
a couple
already-
other people who want to talk too. So
Jesus.
would you try to address that as best as you
The
can?
answer is yes.
Thank you.
And that's my answer.
Okay, thank you.
You can move on.
Let's take another question.
Hi, my name is Michael. Have you had any luck at all with like the hospital networks, like specifically children's? You mentioned the pharmaceutical industry, and to me, they've become a behemoth, and all I see is expansion coming from children's and all these other hospitals. Have they helped you at all with the kids in this issue?
So I want to be clear about something, because I've been in this for a long time and have a different clinical perspective than Ron, in the sense that there are a lot of people doing this work. You would have never met me, ever. We have very, very different values. But I am here because my role was to tell you what I've been sent to tell you, which is how the brain and body works and what it looks like clinically. There are people doing the on-the-ground work who are nurturing children who understand that they don't have to be labeled to be helped, and that all of these things. So there are things happening. But what we understand is certain people get certain things done on certain levels, right? And despite truth in all of the things that me, therapists, who work with all kinds of people do, is if these larger entities are going to benefit from what they're doing, it is really easy, as we saw, to try to talk and shut me down and shut us down and just say this, and this, when I'm coming from the heart. I'm coming from the work, boots on the ground, personal experience. I'm in your community, I'm in everybody's community doing this. But what we see is we get talk, we get numbers. Yes, it matters, and yes, it's important. And what Ron has demonstrated, what I've demonstrated, is regardless, we're going to keep doing the work.
Lashana, can we take one last question?
Absolutely.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth. I guess my question is a little bit personal, because I'm a foster mom, adopted 3 kids that were drug addicted. And so my question about trauma and being in the body and not going away, you talked about going to healing. And I've spent 7 years in the foster care system and nobody helps me.
Yeah.
And we've gone years going to counselors and nobody helps me. No, but I don't know how to go to healing.
Yes.
And what would that look like in general? Because there's a lot of children in my children's position. Like because I hear myself calling him a liar a lot.
Hey, I get it. I work within the foster care system. So I want to validate, it's hard, Elizabeth. It is, right? Because you look at what you do, your heart, your help, and then you see the response. And it's disproportionate. Why are they responding this way? And it can be very confusing, but this is what we're talking about, right? Getting that awareness, that education means that you as a foster parent can get comprehensive understandings, because there are things that can help usher them to healing, right? But you need support in that as well. So this is a great example of when we say, do we need this? Absolutely, because Elizabeth is saying all these years and no one is helping because no one knows what to do. They've tried to help, but the things they tell you to do make it worse. Yeah, that's the head nod, right? Because that's how it works. So what I'm saying is, this is what we need for people to actually understand what's happening, not keep rolling with the same stories that have been made up. But what that looks like is, it looks like us using body-based, nervous system regulating approaches, not just in the therapy space, but everywhere, understanding how it works. We're talking about the traumatized kids, but our own kids in our own homes, people in our community. This really is helping people be human with other humans on the basic level.
I just want to say too, for Elizabeth. Oh, I'm just kidding. You deserve a state of emergency. Your issue is big enough for a state of emergency. You understand? This is what we're fighting for.
And I'm going to let Burr, I'm sorry, we're going to have to end tonight. I'm going to let Burr make a few concluding comments.
Just quickly. First of all, we didn't paint the picture of the positive side of the action steps. Cincinnati School Board has approved the resolution that requesting the governor to make a declaration of an emergency. And the city of Cincinnati City Council, where we've appeared over the last 4 weeks at their public commentary, were resistant at the beginning, but the more they heard from us and others on their electronic communication, the more they began to understand. And Michelle Carney just yesterday, 2 days ago, said, I want to meet with you and work out a plan and see if we can move forward on this. So it looks like in the city, we may be getting some positive direction established. And so I thank you all for coming. I think we struck some hearts here today. And because my heart goes out too, because we have this granddaughter who is struggling with trauma and we didn't know it until she got a therapist that understood it. And she completely turned around our thinking and our reaction. And it's been, I think it's going to prove to be enormously helpful. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's give Burr, LaShonda, and Ron, you know, I just want to just close by telling you, you know, I had several people call me and ask, why is Empower You doing this session? Why are you talking about childhood trauma? And because I think it's important that we open our mental process up to things that we're just not hearing every day the same things. I really respect and thank the three of them for coming in tonight and helping us understand kind of this body reflex that I guess I kind of makes sense, but I didn't really get that. So thank you, LaShonda. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Burr. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you, Tyson, Jessica. Now go out, everyone, tonight and empower you. And thank you for coming tonight. Have a great night. Everyone, please grab your copies of the resolution and the article on your way out the door with Mr. Bill Roll.